You can go and you can sign up for this course and you can pay for those courses and for your fancy degree. But like, what are you really getting out of it? Like the people who go through those courses, like, what are they getting out of it? Do they enjoy writing? Are they making a living writing? Like, what are they choosing to do now?
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, Ella Barnard.
Hey boss, if you are starting on your author journey but are nervous about marketing, then I've got something special for you. I've just released a book called Start Marketing Your Book. In it, I share fundamental marketing principles and simple, actionable steps that you can take right now. For less than a cup of coffee, you could actually have everything you need to start selling more books. To buy the book, go to authorlikeaboss.com/start marketing. Hello, everybody. Hello, author bosses. I am here with the lovely Kara Lockharte. She is the author of Lick of Fire, the Dragon Lovers series, and the Space Shifter Chronicles. She loves writing romances with sexy alpha alien shifters and strong heroines. She doesn't really like writing bios about herself because she can't think of anything clever or funny to say, but she has a sort of funny anecdote about her 4-year-old on her bio at her website. So you can go ahead and check that out. I want to point out that I love the idea of alien shifters. I like it. So thank you so much for being here, Kara.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so I have a question. You want to just jump in and tell us a little bit more about yourself and your author journey?
Okay. Well, so honestly, this pen name was supposed to be kind of this like throwaway pen name because I spent like 10 years trying to be like a serious like science fiction like literary writer. Like I was going to be, the next Margaret Atwood that would write something important that would change the world. And of course, nobody really wanted my literary science fiction, So in between all that, I was like trying to write short stories, and then I got sidetracked by, I started teaching high school because, writing didn't really pay that much money. Mm-hmm. And, and then I got sidetracked by like having kids. So I stopped writing for like a really long time just because of life, but at the same time, because of where I was living at the time, I was living in New York City, and there were certain like events that like all the writers in like a genre would go to. And there I actually met the person who was the one of the editors for the Mass Market Fiction, a Publishers Weekly. And so I kind of like networked my way into a freelancing reviewing gig. So even though I wasn't writing, I was like actively thinking about stories for the time that I wasn't writing. And I was thinking about like what, I read some really great books, and then I read some books that, I was like, well, I could have done a little better, or I see how this could have been better, so, but all of that kind of added up until like, after I had my first kid, I had like left my teaching job and I was at home, and I was like, I really got to get back to this writing thing. And I started like looking around online, trying to see like what was going on. And then, I went to RWA Nationals in New York City, which, again, I lived there in the city at the time. So Times Square was a 20-minute subway ride away for me. So I didn't actually go to the conference because I didn't have time, because I was also breastfeeding at the time. So I could only go for like an hour or so. So I just went to hang out at the bar because that's where you meet people and that's where you hang out.
It's true.
And then, like, I heard people, like, I spoke to people coming back. I think maybe, like, it was Marie Force or Kristen Harbour gave this some amazing presentation about, like, self-publishing. And I was like, oh, my God, the whole self-publishing world has totally changed. And so I started, like, investigating, like, what, self-publishing had become, like, how people were, like being successful. And I was like, well, I could give this a try. It was like, why don't I just, like, write a short story and just like test it out? But then I was like, you know what? Because time I was also thinking about maybe going for an MFA, which, what was kind of stopping me is that like everybody I knew that had gotten an MFA were like nobody was actually making a living writing. Like they were all doing other things like paralegaling or teaching or being a pastry chef. I actually know somebody who got an MFA and then decided to become a pastry chef. So I was like, I don't think an MFA is the way to go. So I was like, well, even if like, say I pay for like a really professional, expensive cover, I pay for like a real professional, like expensive editor, and I do all those things that cost a lot of money, like that's still going to be cheaper than an MFA. And I bet I will have learned a lot. So I put out a short story. I got a really great cover by a designer for a really highly ranked like author in my genre. And I got edited by somebody who was one of the from a New York publisher who was freelancing. And I put my short story out there and it didn't do so well. But like in doing that, like I learned a lot. I learned so much from putting that short story out there. But once I put that short story out there, that actually like, I don't know, it gave me like I had an author page on Amazon that I could point to. So then I started like networking with all these other like authors in like Facebook groups, and that was where really the networking there was what kind of helped me help take me to the next level, because then, people started telling me about all these podcasts, the wonderful new world of podcasting. Like I had no idea how awesome podcasts were,
They're really awesome.
Yeah. And so I started like listening things like Joanna Penn and like the Author Biz. And, like I remember like listening to Michael Anderle's interview on the Author Biz podcast. I was like, oh my gosh, like he really did this, I was like, maybe I could do this too. So that's kind of, I don't know. Is that enough?
Yeah. And so now you started writing. So you started writing some more and you became an indie author.
Mm-hmm. Well,
now what's happening?
Well, so I put the short story back. I can't even remember when I put out the short story, but basically between the short story and the novel that was supposed to come after the short story, I think another like 3 years passed because I had my second kid. Mm-hmm. So last year I put out 2 Space Shifters books, right? And then I realized that, there was a very small niche audience that actually wanted their shifters to be in space. Mm-hmm. And I happened to be like online, like on Facebook one Saturday, which I am never actually on Facebook on Saturday because usually that's like family day. And then like I was in one of these author Facebook groups and someone was like, hey, we're putting together, this group project of like 11 other, like 12 authors where it's going to be like a branding project. You're going to write your own like mini series, but it's going to be a group brand. And then we're going to like cross promote it. We're going to get a series page on Amazon. Who's interested? We have a few slots. And I was like, that sounded interesting. I was like, I'm interested. And they're like, okay, you're in. I was like, what? I just thought I was raising my hand to show interest, not that I was actually going to do it. But I decided to just go with it. I was like, what? Like, let's give it a try, So I kind of temporarily put my own series on hold to write this Dragon Shifter like paranormal series set in the modern day, and that has done like extremely well, like beyond like what my goals were for this year. I mean, in September, basically, I made like something like $9,000 from like those books. Like I only had basically the bulk of that was the 2 books in the Dragon Lover series. Mm-hmm. So, and that was just, I've never made so much money in a month.
That is so exciting. Okay. So I want to ask you a question first before we keep going in that, because I definitely want to know more. But one of the things I thought was very curious is this thinking about getting an MFA or like this is my sense. I'm wondering if you agree and if you can
Mm-hmm.
talk to it, that we have this kind of imposter syndrome. And so before we're like, I want to write, I've been writing my whole life. I've had a journal since I was in the 4th grade. And
Mm-hmm.
yet when I think about wanting to do more with writing, I'm sometimes like, maybe I should go get an MFA.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
so,
Yes.
so can you talk a little bit about the mindset that you had that took you from saying, you know what, I'm just going to try it. Like, like, how did you get to that point? Because I think it's a really important thing that I think a lot of women hesitate to actually put their stuff out there because they don't think that they are expert enough.
That is so true with so many women. And then you hear like men who have like no expertise in anything, but I'll save that rant for another day. But yes, that is so true because like, you know, I went to this like very like this liberal arts college that was like wonderful because I learned so much, but so much of it was like follow your dream and follow your passion. And then like I did follow my dream and my passion. And then when I graduated with a degree in history, I was like, okay, now what can I do with this degree in history? You know, and then I saw other people who were like where they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to go get like an MFA. But later, like when they got their MFAs, they actually weren't doing anything related to writing. And I think that was really the key takeaway for me. Like you can go and you can sign up for this course and you can pay for those courses and for your fancy degree. But like, what are you really getting out of it? Like the people who go through those courses, like, what are they getting out of it? Do they enjoy writing? Are they making a living writing? Like what are they choosing to do now? You know? So unfortunately for a lot of women, I feel like they're like, oh, I'm just going to like keep my writing on the side. And maybe you have it get like the idea of getting an MFA is more like, oh, it's like an official stamp of approval, that like an outside stamp of approval. So I can like prove to my family and my friends that yes, I really am a writer and I'm just not like doodling around, you know? Mm-hmm. But I think honestly, like, especially in today's world of like self-publishing, like the best thing to do is to and honestly, the cheapest thing to do is to just put yourself out there and just put something up on Amazon. You know, mm-hmm. you don't have to pay for $100 cover, but you know what? If you get like a cheap pre-made cover and you put your book up on Amazon, just the actual act of like formatting your book and organizing your thing and learning how to upload it to Amazon, like that's invaluable. Like that's, you know, your MFA is not going to teach you that, you know.
I find that a lot of women and a lot of people, but I work a lot with women and I am myself a woman. So right. My experience is that we can be very successful at coming up with useful things to do. Like yes. Getting an MFA sounds really like, it's not sexy, but it sounds sexy when you're like, I want to be a writer, I'm getting an MFA. And it feels like, oh, this is definitely moving me towards my goal of writing full time. But it's actually a way of procrastinating yes. from making a living writing full time. Now you might be writing full time for your, you know, as you know, you might be writing every day for your MFA, yeah. But, and that's not to say you shouldn't get an MFA if you really want to, you know, learn craft and, you know, like, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. It just depends on what your intention and your goal is. If your goal is to make a living writing full time, then maybe, you know, the best thing to do now is to self-publish a book and get all that experience, even if your book doesn't do that well versus right. spending 2 years getting an MFA and then still having to then start and get that experience.
Right. I mean, even just publishing like a 10,000 word short story, like that is going to teach you so much. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, you don't have to invest as much, like with a short story, you don't have to invest as much in like editing, like even just learning how to work with an editor, like that's like super important, and learning how to work with a copy editor and a proofreader, like all those things, like that's a skill. Like the first editor that I ever hired that was like straight out of New York Publishing, like she is not the editor I work with today. Like she was great, but she didn't give me what I wanted. And I realized in working with her that I needed a different kind of like developmental editor that I could do more back and forth with. So, I mean, even that, like learning how to communicate with an editor.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit, a couple of things and I will come back to some of the others later, but I want to talk about the developmental editing because I haven't talked with very many people about that part of the process. And I think, I'm really glad you brought it up because I think it'll be useful for people. So, and you don't have to talk about the editors specifically, but what did you find? Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? So when you're looking at editor, you're like, I just need an editor. And you're like, New York editor, it should be great, da, da, da. Right. But what did you find after you had it that you were like, oh, this is what I liked and this is what I needed to be different?
Right. No, that's a great question. I mean, for me, because I had basically learned writing through critique groups. Like for a really long time when I was trying to be a literary science fiction writer, like I had like a monthly critique group that I would meet up with and have like a group of 4 other writers that would go along and critique my stories. And I felt like the New York editor that I hired to work on my stuff, actually, she had a more gentle critique than my critique group would have given me. And I was like, okay, maybe, somebody said to me, sometimes the editors you hire, they are not going to really dig into your manuscript with a knife because, they want you to hire them again, but I didn't actually communicate to the editor, like what I wanted, I didn't say like, I really want you to be straightforward with me. Don't sugarcoat things. If something is terrible, I want you to say, this is terrible. This dialogue is like sucks or whatever. I want you to tell me that. And I didn't communicate that with her, So, I mean,
it's a partnership. Okay.
Exactly. And I think finding an editor it's like dating, right? Like the right editor for me is not necessarily going to be the right editor for other people, right? So,
yeah. And I think that's important because a lot of people, when they're just starting, they don't know. Like I didn't know that you should get an editor, per your genre, somebody who's really familiar with it so that they know what the readers want. Not just to make a good story if possible, but to actually make it slightly more marketable because they know the genre so well and they're familiar with what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, somewhat related to that, I mean, I have a really good friend who is like basically the first like alpha or beta reader for some really like literarily like acclaimed like science fiction writers, and she critiqued my story for me, and I knew like based on her critique, I was like, that's the wrong audience. She gave me a great critique, but like that audience is not my audience. And having an editor who understands the audience that you're writing for is so important.
Yeah, I agree. So what kind of feedback, and maybe this is, I'm going to get a little bit tender with you maybe, but
Sure.
What kind of feedback did you find was really, really helpful?
From my editor? From my critique group?
Now your current editor.
My current editor, she will tell me like when things like she'll like when I'm going too fast and when I need to flesh out more details, or basically when things just don't make sense, she will write like, this doesn't make any sense at all. Like, well, not right, but like in the comments, and then she also knows, like, I've been working with her now for like, this will be like it will be like the 5th book I've worked with her. Like, and she also knows, like, she recognizes my weaknesses. And so she's like, okay, you did, that problematic ending last time, this is a similar problem. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like, okay, I'll go back and fix it. I try to get away with things with her, but I can't.
See, the tone of voice when I asked about your current editor, and you're like, it was like love, exasperation, like appreciation and frustration all in one little sigh. Because I had another author tell me, they're like, you shouldn't like your editor. Like, your editor is not like, you can be like friendly and cordial with each other, but you're not like, if you're friends, and you can be friends, but you shouldn't like the feedback. You should, and I have someone who edits my nonfiction books, and I have to I read the first few, and then I'm like, I have to go take a nap. I can't look at this. And then I go and relax for like a day. And I sit on it and I'm like, get into the right mindset. It's going to be fine. And I'm writing nonfiction. Like I'm not like, it's not even like from my heart tenderness. It's just like, but I'm like, okay, go read this. And then like, because I know it's going to make me better. And what I've realized is I have a tendency to really, really say really a lot when I write. But yes. She's teaching me about my writing, and each book I do, I get better because it's almost like a student-teacher kind of relationship, although not. Yeah. Okay. So how did you find your current developmental editor?
I belong to this forum called Romance Divas that opens its membership every once in a while. I don't know if it's open right now, but like they basically had like a whole thread of like editors like posting their services, and then so I asked around to a couple of the other authors, and they were like, yeah, she's really good. And so I contacted her. And this time I was like, I gave her a sample of my work, and like we talked back and forth. And I think she might have given me a sample edit. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. But eventually I was just like, okay, I just bit the bullet. Like, let's give this a try. And, but from learning from the relationship from the past editor, I went to my new editor and I was like, okay, this is what I want from you. I want like a really like no sugarcoating critique. Like, if something is terrible, you need to tell me it's terrible. If something is lame, if it makes you laugh because it's so stupid, you have to tell me that. Like, And she did.
She did. It's so great. I'm working on a book right now with someone who does editing. We're writing about beta readers because being able to set the expectations for what you need is a critical part of getting the feedback.
Yes.
Okay. So you guys, that's a good way to go into forums, go into Facebook groups and find editors, and maybe ask other authors who their editors are. If they have any spaces available on their editors, that other authors in your genre, that might be a good way to find somebody. And along that note, I wanted to ask you, because you said that after some part, you started marketing or networking with other authors in Facebook groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So when I first put out my short story, there were actually a bunch of different Facebook groups that basically like were vetted by whether or not like you had like an Amazon page, because they just didn't want like random people joining and just like for no reason at all and spamming them with like sunglass ads, So because I had like an Amazon author page from that one short story, I was able to be like, hey, I write paranormal romance, and they would just let me into their Facebook group. And then there would be like all these discussions about like, what do you think of this cover? Or I'm organizing this promo. These were the days actually when people were starting to realize the importance of newsletters. So I got into a couple of like newsletter builder promos like that were just like insane. Like I think I paid like something like $20 and then for this one promo, and I got like 5,000 subscribers. Wow. Like, and at the time people like those subscribers clicked. Those subscribers like open emails, because this is before everyone started doing all those newsletter builders, So those people, like I remember like talking to like some of the other authors, like their open rates were like crazy, like 70 or 80%, And so I was like, wow, okay. And so, with the 5,000 newsletter subscribers that I got from that first newsletter builder, what did I do with them? Nothing for 3 years while I had a second kid. So, but then I learned, like, when I decided to put out, like, another book, I was like, okay, what can I do with these newsletter subscribers? But because, people kind of sort of remembered my name, like, I started, like, asking people what do I do with these 5,000 like newsletter subscribers that I haven't ever emailed, And so people started giving me like advice because they had, remembered my name or, I was part of that Facebook group, and like most indie authors are so like forthcoming about information. I think because we all recognize like we've all been in that boat in one time or another. And, whatever information we have now, like it's probably almost like useless a year from now. You know what I mean? Like things change so fast. Like it does you no good to hold on to information that could help other people. Because that person like might turn around 6 months from now and give you information that you need, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Plus, there's very little, and I've said this a million times, but there's very little competition among indie authors because people can read way faster than you can write.
Yeah. So true.
So you're not losing a customer by giving somebody else a customer. You're gaining somebody who knows that you can give them good book recommendations.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. So now you've been writing. You were in that anthology and doing really well. You're like, I can tell in your voice, you're like, it's still kind of new.
It is very new. It's very strange.
It's craziness. So, but then you started writing these space shifter, right? These space shifters. So, how did you find that audience that was looking for alien shifters in space?
Well, honestly, when I was thinking about the space shifter, like romances, like this was like about like 3 years before I actually got the novel out. This started with a short story. And at the time, like I had just read, what was it? Chris Fox's book, like, you know, that.
Right to Market.
Yes, that one. And I was looking at the market and I was like looking at, this is before like a couple years ago when like science fiction, nobody was really writing science fiction romances. And like the ones that were in there, their covers were just terrible, you know? And I was just like, I can like, you know, I bet if I hire somebody really good to design me a good like cover, I bet it will do really well. And I did. And then I didn't write that book for 3 years. So by the time I put my book out, I was like, oh, everybody's covers got so good, you know? but that's, you know, I actually, you know, I guess in this case, this is more of I thought about with Chris Fox's, maybe it was his quote. It was like, write the most marketable book of your heart, you know? So I was like trying to think about, I actually wanted to write like a space opera with intergalactic politics. And I was like, there's really not that much of a market out there for that. But I love romances and hey, shifters seem to be pretty hot. So why not shifters in space?
Well, there's more space opera now. That's half the people I interview for my podcast.
Yes.
But now you found an audience so you just kind of were like, I think it's important because you're saying this all very casually, but you've clearly put a lot of thought into it and you've read and researched. And so I love Chris Fox. He's been on the show.
Right.
He's so generous and really brilliant, but his idea is like, you know, there's markets out there, right to market, but make sure it's what you love. Cause so you don't have to give up what you love in order to write what people want to read. You can do both. Find where that overlaps. And so you thought about it and you were like, well, I like sci-fi. I like romance and shifters seem to be hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
And yeah, pretty much. Well, then I realized that, you know, the science fiction and the shifters, that wasn't so much of a crossover audience. So then I started writing dragon shifters, which is in like a modern day setting, which has done very well.
So what are you working on now?
Now I'm trying to work on the third Lick of Fire book, which is the third Dragon Shifters, like paranormal or Dragon Lovers series. That's what I'm trying to finish. And I might be, well, no, I am co-writing a story with an urban fantasy author for this box set.
Ooh.
Yeah. So we're going to see how it goes. It's going to be my first time co-writing, so we'll see.
It's going to be fine. A lot of people I've talked to, they really, really, really enjoy it. So I see that, you know, I want to ask you about your marketing in terms of, so you had this newsletter and you didn't write to it for 3 years. You ignored them for 3 years, all these subscribers.
Yes.
Did you keep them and start writing a newsletter, or what did you do with that?
So with marketing, basically last year when I was like, okay, I'm going to finally put out these Space Shifter books. And then I was like, okay, what am I going to do for marketing? I don't have a budget. I really don't have money except for I have these 5,000 newsletter subscribers that may or may not open my newsletter. So I decided that I was just going to focus on like one thing. And I said to myself, the one thing I can focus on is really learning to make my mailing list work for me. So to that end, I actually started a semi-defunct like Facebook group it was called something like Newsletter Best Practices for Authors, where basically me and a bunch of other authors, we discussed like the best practices for newsletters and we exchanged tips and stuff. And so with that 5,000 newsletter subscribers, I sent out like an initial, hey, you haven't heard from me, but you signed up for my list like 3 years ago, which now you can't do anymore but this was before GDPR, right? Mm-hmm. And then, immediately like half of them unsubscribed, which I kind of expected. Learning this from the Facebook group, and I didn't get discouraged. And the first email that I sent to them, I made sure what I had read was to make sure you're offering people value. So because I still belong to all these author Facebook groups, I said to people, I gave it to them straight. I was like, I have these 5,000 newsletter subscribers. I've never emailed them before. I have no idea like if they're even going to respond. But if you have like a perma-free or a freebie, like, or a reader magnet that I can point them to, I would love to stick it in my newsletter and send it to them. So I had like 10, 12, 15 people like respond. And they're like, yeah, sure, you can give my perma-free away. That's fine, Mm-hmm. And so for that first email, for the 5,000 newsletter subscribers, like they got an email from me that was full of free books, because I was just kind of introducing myself to them, trying to offer value. And so half of them unsubscribed, which is fine. And I kept participating in like other little promotions and putting like free books in there to just try to like, get people to open my newsletter. But as I did that, the more newsletters I sent out, the more I learned about the more I learned about like what I wanted out of a newsletter and what I could like put in a newsletter and what I could do like to get people to click other than offering them giveaways, other than offering them free books, mm-hmm. So like now in my current newsletters now, I do very few giveaways. I probably put in maybe one free book from like maybe like a perma-free from like an author friend or something like that. But most of the newsletters I send out are all about like my own stuff, but like in a not marketing, not spammy kind of way. Like, so.
Okay, yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Not marketing, not spammy kind of way.
How do you talk about your own stuff? Because that's a real question that a lot of people have. Is how to, and I think it's a mindset thing, but it's mm-hmm. how to talk about their own work without feeling sleazy or salesy, like in a natural way. There's two questions there: how to like get into the mindset to do that, and then how to actually implement it.
So I think part of it is it's understanding the audience. So like, like with the marketing funnel, you have your cold audience and like your warm audience, mm-hmm. So it's like the cold audience is made up of people who have never heard of you before and have no idea who the heck you are, and the warm audience is like, oh my God, people who have like read your book and kind of enjoyed it and might be up for another one, but haven't bought it yet kind of thing, So with my list last year, I felt more nervous because I knew I was emailing to a cold audience. But now that I'm emailing to more, I assume, a warmer audience, like I'm including things like, excerpts of my current work in progress. What else am I doing? I do a little bit of talking about my own like life, but like in very like generic like mom sort of way, because like I have two little kids, so I'm very like protective of like mm-hmm. their identities and pictures. Like I don't post pictures of my kids in my newsletter or anything like that. But I mean, I will post pictures of like their artwork or the giant mess that they left on the living room floor, mm-hmm. things like that. And I found that like people really like those again, those personal touches. And for me, maybe I'm just lazy, but half of my personal touches are, look at this photograph of this giant mess that I'm not going to clean up because I'm working on this book so hard for you. So, like in my automation sequence, I actually have a picture of my desk, which I tell them, this is with a $20 like used kitchen table. I bought it for Craigslist that was supposed to be for my writing, but as you can see, it's entirely covered with crayons, and I didn't realize there was a diaper on the desk until after I took the picture, and it's a clean diaper because my kids aren't eating diapers anymore. They're just using it to play with their dolls. And then I got emails back from people like, yeah, I totally get that. Like, So
it sounds like you found, well, one, your audience is probably your readers are probably moms like yourself. Yep. So that helps. You're not like, guys in the military, look at this diaper.
Exactly.
They're like, oh yeah, I totally relate. Nope. So you're able to, you're sending relatable content. So how do you invite people to purchase your book in your newsletter then?
That's a good question. I think about the tropes and expectations that they're reading for, and I include excerpts of what I'm working on, like a really maybe a sexy, funny excerpt of a scene I'm working on. But then actually at the bottom of each of my emails, I also include an excerpt, like a funny, sexy excerpt, or a quote from one of one of the books that have already been
previously published.
Yeah. Because I know you can't assume that everyone on your list has read all of your books, You just can't. And every single time, people click on, I also, at the end of my email list, of each email, I have a list of all of my books. So anytime I include an excerpt, I do find that people click on the link of the book that had that excerpt.
Cool. So you don't have to be like, hey, look at my book, it's for sale, it's good. You just have a list at the end of every email of your books, clickable, and then you just put an excerpt, and then people can read the excerpt. If they want to buy it, they can. If they want to click, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. But that way you're selling without selling.
Right. It's just you can put it as, oh, this is, I don't know, this is my favorite excerpt from this book. If you want some feedback, if you want interaction, here's my favorite excerpt. Do you have what's your favorite excerpt? Or you could do a short little giveaway, send me your favorite lines from my book in exchange for, I don't know, something. I don't know. You could do a giveaway like that, and then based on those reader responses, you can then turn their responses into excerpts for future newsletters.
Ooh. Oh, clever. Plus you have engagement.
Exactly.
Okay. So you had told me a little while ago that you were actually sending an unedited rough draft.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Okay. So for the first, my first Dragon Lovers book, it was basically the start of a brand new series. I didn't know if my audience would cross over to this new series. And so I basically said to them, I'm writing this first book in a new series. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it to you guys, the unedited rough draft, as a serial. So for about 18 weeks, every week, I sent them a chapter that was unedited from my rough draft, exactly as I told them in advance, it's exactly as I gave it to my editor. So it's unproofed, all the ungrammatical mistakes, all the editing, none of the editing has been done, and you can see it as raw as I wrote it, And so that actually, I found that did boost sales, but unfortunately, when I did that, I think my open rates went down because I think people actually were saving my emails and to read at the end of the serial.
Because they didn't want to like have to wait a week. Netflix has spoiled us all. We don't want to wait. We don't want to wait a week for each thing. We want to read them all at the same time. Okay.
Exactly. But at the same time, like when I launched that week, I had so much more of a boost in sales than I would have ever expected. Because I think what happens is people read it and they're like, "Oh, this is pretty good," and they're like, "Oh, I want to read like the rest of it, but I want to read it edited," because they got they basically got the rough draft of the serial. But I also said that I wasn't going to include any like very explicit scenes because honestly, like, I don't know the laws in other countries, and I know there are other countries who have laws against sending very explicit things through email. And I was like, I don't know what country people are living in. I'm just going to follow just be safe and keep everything PG-13. But if you really need to read that scene, then you're going to have to buy the book.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You get the whole book, unedited, rough draft, except for all the sexy scenes.
Exactly.
If you want the sexy scenes, you have to buy the book.
Yeah, so it worked for actually Alona Andrews, who's like New York Times.
I love her.
Yes.
Her Clean Sweep series.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's what she does, And so since it worked well with my newsletter, I actually tried doing it to my blog for my second book. And honestly, I have no idea. I mean, my second book did really, really well, but I don't know how much of that was due to Facebook ads versus like blog traffic and stuff. And, I also don't know if I actually had the comments thing turned on right for my blog. So nobody commented. I'm actually not sure if my commenting function works.
Okay, so that's an important thing if you guys can. Data and
Yes.
having the technology working. But yeah, okay. Well, I think I like to say that your blog and your newsletter can be very, very similar or the same. If you take your newsletter content and put it on your blog, it keeps your website fresh.
Yes.
For search engines.
Yes.
And it's reusable and multi-purposing all that content, so you don't have to do one blog post and then an entirely separate newsletter. I think it's smart to just repurpose it. Whether you'll see the results, you might not see a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't take that much time to do it. So you definitely have to have a newsletter.
Yes.
So if you're going to put out a newsletter regularly, go ahead and go ahead and put it on your blog. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, I wanted to ask, I had this question for you. How do you stay motivated? And you had a little story about Rachel Herron.
Oh, yes.
Herron?
Yeah. Yes, Rachel Herron, who also has her own podcast, which podcast I can't remember now. But she belongs to my local RWA chapter. And last year she gave a talk. And in that talk, she was basically talking about how, like, in the entire history of in all of human history, if you think about it, if you want to be a woman writer, like, this is the best time to do it, because something like, I don't know, you think about it, if you grew up in medieval times, nobody knew how to read, and then whatchamacallit, even like things like computers didn't even appear until the 80s. And even after computers, like, KDP didn't exist until like 10 years ago, like maybe short, I don't know, less than 10 years ago. Amazon was still just the bookstore, So I think that, sorry, I'm trying to recall what she actually said.
It's a good time to be a woman writer.
Yes. I mean, because even when Jane Austen was writing, there weren't as many women writers who were making living, right? So this is just really a good time to be a woman writer. You have computers, you can dictate, you can just, put it out there and get a worldwide audience, like, without ever having to leave your home. Like, that's amazing.
Yes. Yes, it is. And you can find the exact, I just think it's amazing that we can find our exact audience for what we are writing, like, because social media, which I know a lot of people, it's like, oh, social media. I'm like, you can find anybody on social media if you put the time into it, and it's free.
Yes.
like you used to, in order to market things, you used to have to pay thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get on TV or in newspapers, or, it just wasn't as easy as it is now. It's free, and anybody you just have to go find a group or make your own group.
It's true. It's true.
And collect your audience, and then give them your book, and they will buy it. And then, it's really, it's still work. And that's the thing I think a lot of authors are looking for, like this sexy, like, it's like the diet pill, you just want to take the pill and have it.
Right.
and then you lose the weight and that's it. But right. It's not like that. It's still work, but it's more possible than it's ever been.
Right. Exactly. You still have to do the work. It's not that there isn't work involved. It's just different, it's just different. And it's more figuring out the time and figuring out the technology, but it is totally possible. Like if you put in the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is what's different. I don't think a lot of people appreciate is it's more women are good connectors generally. We're better at connecting. And that's exactly the kind of marketing that is the most successful on social media and just right now in general. So we have this imposter syndrome, I think, a lot of women about, whether what we have is good enough and, whether we should be marketing our stuff or not. And it's easy to have the imposter syndrome when you think that you have to be like, I have to be up and show up super professional and polished and but actually I am not polished at all. But I'm really real. And that's very appealing to a lot of people because authenticity is what people are looking for more than polish now. And so you don't have to worry about imposter syndrome as much. People are more skeptical of polished people. In fact, they think they're the imposter.
Exactly. Everything's Photoshop, right?
The
or
more
fake.
real you are, the more real you are, the more people will trust you and enjoy you. And that's something I think a lot of women are really good at doing is being just themselves. So, and caring and loving and creative. Yay! Sorry, I could go on about this. This is like my soapbox here. Okay, so what advice would you give to other authors who want to be successful?
I think the first thing you have to figure out is what success means to you. I mean, like for other people, it might be winning lots of awards. But for me, it was, I wanted to make money. So I researched a lot on the internet of trying to figure out who was doing well. And I listened to podcasts to try and figure out their strategies. And I read things in K-boards and on Facebook groups, and I just did a lot of reading and listening and research, and I mean, I guess even if you want to win awards, you still need to do research, right? Because you need to figure out what awards to apply to or who you need to get to know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So,
can you talk a little bit about networking?
Oh, yes. Networking has been so important to like almost every single stage of my author journey. I mean, I didn't realize it, but I was just so blessed and just living in New York City, which I know not everybody wants to or can live in New York City. But, yeah. But like just going out, like, just your writing meetups, like my first critique group was like, it was listed on meetup.org for like they were only listed there for like, I think it was like 3 months while it was free. And then it totally came off. And if I had signed on to meetup.org at some other random point, I would have never found them, so like, just go to your local writing meetups or even check your library. If you're starting out, sometimes they have writing groups or see about starting your own, like finding a group of other like-minded people who want to be like, who are on your level or maybe slightly above your level, who are willing to kind of like take that journey with you. That's super, super valuable because you can learn together and learn from each other and collaborate.
I love that. And yes, many of us, I've lived in New York City and I don't anymore. But I'm sure I'm not alone with that. But the amazing thing is, like, now I live in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, and there is a writing group within 45 minutes drive of me. And so, or if you can't find your people, you can always find them online.
Yes.
And a little shameless plug here, the Author Boss Academy is a really great place to find other authors who are serious about working on what they're doing and making their dream a reality. So it's special, but even if it's not the Academy, if it's someplace, it's really special to find those people who will cheer for you when things are hard. So yes. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about your latest book and where people can find you?
Well, my latest book is actually book 2 of the series I released this year. So it's called Belonging to the Dragon, and it's a reunion romance that's also like an upstairs downstairs romance, which is involving a dragon shifter billionaire. So
cool. And where can people find you?
My books are on Amazon. I'm in Kindle Unlimited, and I'm at, you can find me mostly on Facebook, facebook.com/Kara Lockharte, or you can find me at my website.
What's your website?
www.karalockharte.com.
Lockharte is LOCKHARTE.
Yes.
.com.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your information with us and telling us about your journey and how you became how you got to where you are now.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you everybody for listening. Hugs and happy authoring. Hey boss, you made it to the end of the episode. You're the best. Because of that, I'm going to give you a special invitation to find out more about the Author Boss Academy, where I and a bunch of really awesome authors hang out, have fun, and get stuff done. If you end up joining, tell me the secret word and you'll get a special bonus. Find out more about the Academy at authorlikeaboss.com/academy. The secret word is nipples. Hugs and happy authoring. I hope to see you soon.
If you love the Author Like a Boss podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Until next time.